Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date developments in the global financial world.
Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab warned that the Lebanese must set aside their differences as the country has no time to lose in tackling its major financial crisis, saying that a government recovery plan was not a sacred text and could be amended. The government approved the plan last week, announcing that it would form the basis of negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for aid. Diab was speaking at a meeting of Lebanon's fractious sectarian leadership to review the plan, which maps out vast losses in the financial system. President Michel Aoun said the IMF was a mandatory path for recovery. The government proposals have encountered strong criticism from the commercial banking sector, which, according to the plan, is set to sustain losses of some $83.2 billion US. Diab urged political parties, economic syndicates, and the banks to set aside differences. There is no place for score settling, he said, adding that trading accusations would be costly for all. Samir Gigi, an opponent of the government who attended the meeting, said he would not support this plan or any other that did not start with serious government steps to fight corruption and waste, including customs evasion. The crisis is seen as the greatest risk to stability since the 1975 to 1990 civil war. The local currency has lost more than half its value since October, and depositors have largely been shut out of their savings as dollars have become ever more scarce. Inflation, unemployment, and poverty have soared.
The European Commissioner for Economic and Financial Affairs, Paolo Gentiloni, said that the European Union has entered the deepest economic recession in its history because of COVID-19 pandemic, and inflation will almost disappear while public debt and budget deficits will balloon. The Commission forecast that as the economy contracts this year, consumer prices will stagnate. It said inflation rate will slow to 0.2% in 2020 before accelerating to 1.1% next year, and the Eurozone is to return to growth of 6.3%. Investment will plunge 13.3% this year. The effort to keep economies alive will boost budget deficits in the European zone and aggregate 8.5% of GDP this year from 0.6% last year, before the aggregate gap shrinks again to 3.5% in 2021. A surge in public debt, however, will take longer to undo. That's according to the Commission. They forecast that the Eurozone debt will jump to 102.7% of GDP this year from 86% last year and recede only to 98.8% in 2021. The Commission also said all 19 countries of the zone will significantly breach the 3% limit this year. Italy, Greece, Spain, and Portugal will be among the hardest hit by economic effects of the pandemic, while Luxembourg, Malta, and Austria are to weather the shock better. The Commission forecasts the budget of Italy, the budget deficit of the country hardest hit by the virus, will surge to the most to 11.1% of GDP this year, 1.6% last year, but will fall back to 5.6% in 2021. The somber forecast from Brussels, the first since the beginning of the epidemic, may put further strain on Italian government debt, which is already being tested by markets despite massive purchases of the country's bonds by the European Central Bank.
The launch of a climate change curriculum that teaches students how to tackle deniers and advises them to eat less dairy and meat has sparked a debate in New Zealand, where economic growth is hinged on the success of its milk, poultry, and farming industry. New Zealand is known for its dairy and grass-fed meat, the backbone to its economy, but the launch of a new climate change curriculum in schools is rubbing farmers the wrong way. The Education Ministry says students years 7 to 10 will learn the role science plays in understanding climate change, its impacts, and how students can help to adapt to it. The lessons also tackle climate change skepticism. Dairy farmer Malcolm Lumsden disagrees with the curriculum, saying that while climate change should be based on science and it's very convenient to take figures from a certain date to put your case to say that the climate is changing. Lumsden worries that a new generation could bite the hand that feeds them and unfairly target farmers with tighter regulations and rules as farmers face the dilemma of feeding a growing population yet struggling to trim methane emissions. New Zealand's leader Jacinda Ardern introduced sweeping reforms to tackle climate change this year, including emission targets for agriculture and a plan for the country to become carbon neutral by 2050. Local parliamentarian in the same region as Lumsden, Tim van der Molen, sees no problem with the new models so long as they cover a broad perspective and show the impacts on all individuals in society. Meanwhile, recent school graduate, 18-year-old Lourdes Vano, local Greens Party candidate, welcomes the curriculum and its focus on science and hopes it will shape how students feel about their future.
The United States and Britain launched formal negotiations on a free trade agreement on May the 5th, vowing to work quickly to seal a deal that could counter the massive drag of the coronavirus pandemic on trade flows and the two allies' economies. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and UK Trade Minister Liz Truss said a joint statement that the talks will be conducted virtually and will involve over 300 US and UK staff and officials in nearly 13 negotiating groups. The officials say they will undertake negotiations at an accelerated pace and committed the resources necessary to progress at a fast pace. The first round of talks began with the new US data, and it showed a record drop in US exports and a contraction in the vast US services sector for the first time in over a decade. It is Washington's first major new trade negotiation in 2020. London has also been working out trade terms with the European Union following its exit from the bloc in January. London's goal was to exponentially complete both negotiations, and there could be a positive dynamic between them, even though they are being headed by different lead negotiators, one UK official told journalists in a background briefing. The opening plenary will be followed by virtual meetings from May the 6th to the 15th. The UK official said while it's unusual to negotiate on all areas at once, the two sides were keen to move quickly. The official added the further rounds will take place approximately every 6 weeks and will be carried out remotely until it's safe to travel.
Some 40 Cuban sugar mills remain open out of season despite a partial lockdown of the country in a last-ditch effort to add foreign exchange to government's all but empty coffers. The coronavirus pandemic has shuttered tourism, a key foreign exchange earner, and raised shipping prices for the import-dependent country, already reeling from stepped-up sanctions under the administration of US President Donald Trump. However, economic activity continues, from farming and construction to mining, with the government directing scarce resources to food production and export earners such as sugar and nickel. When the harvest began in November, Cuba said it would have produced 1.5 million metric tons of raw sugar by May, of which 800,000 tons would be for export, despite shortages of fuel and other supplies. To date, just 2 of 13 sugar-producing provinces have met their targets, and Reuters estimates total output at 1.1 million metric tons to 1.2 million metric tons, based on provincial media reports and sources with knowledge of the harvest. Public transportation, schools, and most retail activity has been shut down, with social distancing and mask wearing mandatory, including at work. Workers are transported to their jobs by the state in this century-planned economy. Cuba has reported 1,668 cases of the viral disease and 69 deaths, There have been no reported outbreaks in production facilities. Sugar has long been Cuba's most important industry, with output reaching 8 million metric tons in 1991. It now ranks behind sectors such as tourism, communications, and pharmaceuticals, but still earns hundreds of millions in foreign exchange. The Caribbean island nation consumes between 600,000 and 700,000 metric tons of sugar per year and has an agreement to sell China 400,000 metric tons annually. It sells the rest on the open market. The industry now hopes to match last year's 1.3 million metric ton output, one of the lowest annual amounts in more than a century, before May's hot and humid weather forced the mills to close.
This has been Business Review, your daily source for the most critical financial stories. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.